Welcome back to Solo Marvel Champion. Today I'm finally able to release my new campaign system for Marvel Champions. If you'll remember, back in March, I believe, I released the Pocketverse campaign system, and in that video I talked about how Thunderbolt Apache Leader by Danverson Games had a huge impact on me and a huge influence in what is actually going to be the campaign I'm releasing today. Initially, my new campaign, which I'm calling Shatterverse, was very heavily influenced in the way the game was set up. So, when I released Pocketverse, which was a simpler system, I had a lot of feedback about how simple and easy it was to implement. And that actually made me think, oh man, maybe I don't need to release the other campaign system because I had a really long, detailed process for setting up that campaign. Then at one point I decided, no, I can still use that campaign, but I have to alter how I think about setup. And at that point I decided I will use Pocketverse as a module for playing Shatterverse. And I played around with that for a while, and it was just a little too cumbersome. It didn't flow as easily as I liked it to. So I pivoted, and instead of making Pocketverse a module of Shatterverse, I made Shatterverse, you can see right here, an expansion for Pocketverse. Thanos' snap did not have the intended outcome. Instead of removing half of all life from the universe, the snap shattered the universe into multiple pocket universes. To make it difficult for anyone to undo this act, Thanos threw the Infinity Stones into the cosmos to let them land where they may. Across multiple Pocketverses, heroes seek out and battle the villains who have taken control of the stones there, with the hope of uniting the stones and using them to find and defeat Thanos, and restoring the shattered universe. So what this does is just make a few little changes to Pocketverse and expand it into the Shatterverse campaign. So Shatterverse setup is almost identical to Pocketverse setup. There are just a few words changed here and there, an extra step added, and then some explanatory text about how the system works. So step one, instead of creating a Pocketverse, you'll create two Pocketverses, and neither Pocketverse can have Thanos as the villain. Step two, for each Pocketverse, you will shuffle the villains, randomly placing one in each villain zone. That is the same as Pocketverse, but then we're going to shuffle all 6 of the Infinity Stones and place one face down in each zone. And then we're going to choose one to turn face up. That's going to have some meaning here in a little bit. For each Pocketverse, each player assigns one hero and one aspect they haven't assigned yet to each villain zone, then builds the decks. And that's exactly the same. I made no adjustment there. Step 4 is new. Choose a Pocketverse in which to start the campaign, based on which Infinity Stone you see in the Pocketverse, whichever one you chose. And I think strategically I'm always going to choose the very first one to see what the first stone is I could win in Shatterverse. You're going to choose which Pocketverse to start in. Step 5 is unchanged. It was step 4 in the past. It's just go left to right, and reminder, campaign setup happens after villain setup and before drawing your opening hand. Now I do talk about a custom environment here. Villains in this expansion will have Infinity Stones in their encounter decks. The custom environment on the following page is used to resolve their special when they're revealed as an encounter card. So let's take a look at that really quickly. It's just an Infinity Stones environment I created, permanent setup. Forced response, after an Infinity Stone environment is revealed, resolve its special ability, then place it in the encounter discard pile. So that allows you to reveal an Infinity Stone from the encounter deck and not need the gauntlet to make that Infinity Stone go off. Next, victory and defeat. I did add a little bit in here. If at least one hero survived and the villain was defeated, each surviving hero may add up to 3 aspect cards from their deck to the deck of a hero in the next villain zone. If at least one hero does so, add +1 on the training line in the next villain zone. That is the same. Next is new. Search the villain's deck and discard pile for all Infinity Stones. The players as a group gain control of those. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. Defeat. If all the heroes were defeated, check a Somber Moment box in the next villain zone. That is unchanged. But I have added search the villain's deck and discard pile for all Infinity Stones and add them to the next villain zone. The Shatterverse campaign. The goal of the campaign is to retrieve all 6 Infinity Stones and then defeat Thanos. As such, the only game in Pocketverse which is meant... Can't even read today. As such, the only game in each Pocketverse which is a must-win is Game 3, which will have all 3 stones from that verse if you failed both of the previous 2 games. And that's why in these cases they're saying all Infinity Stones instead of the Infinity Stone. Because there could be multiple Infinity Stones in an encounter deck if you have lost games. Game 7 of the Shatterverse campaign against Thanos will only be played if the players control all 6 stones, meaning if they've lost Game 3 of either Pocketverse, they lose the campaign. Note that in Game 7, Thanos controls the Infinity Gauntlet, but not the stones, which are controlled by the players. Any of Thanos' effects which reference an Infinity Stone are ignored. So I thought that was cool. He's still going to get the benefits of having the Infinity Gauntlet. I believe it's +1 scheme, +1 attack. But he's not going to have Infinity Stones going off because the players control them. Campaign setup had to change just a little bit. 1 through 4 don't see any changes, but I did need to add a step 2.5 between steps 2 and 3. Shuffle each Infinity Stone in this villain zone into the encounter deck, and put the Infinity Stones custom environment into play. That's just a step between those to remind you to do that. Now we come to the fun thing, which is player-controlled Infinity Stones. Over the course of this campaign, the players will gain control of the Infinity Stones, which are required to find and defeat Thanos. That's a little line that says, you have to do that, even if you're not getting any other benefit for it, because the next section says, in a standard campaign, controlling a particular Infinity Stone in a Pocketverse grants the following to the heroes in that verse. So you do have 2 Pocketverses out there, and these stones only affect the ones in that particular Pocketverse. Mind Stone, heroes get +1 thwart. Power Stone, heroes get +1 attack. Soul Stone, each player reduces the cost of the first ally they play each round by 1. Reality Stone, players get 1 additional mulligan each game, and that's even if a Somber Moment is checked. Of course, a Somber Moment says you don't get to mulligan. Time Stone, once per game, players may restart the game. I'm still unsure about this one. That one doesn't seem super fun or necessary, really. I think when you're playing solo anyway, or playing with your friends, there are times when you're just going to restart it anyway. But the fact that it's here, I think, indicates that if you don't have that stone, you can't do that. So you have to have the Time Stone to be able to restart a game. And then the Space Stone, the Pocketverses are united. These effects apply to heroes in both Pocketverses. So if one Pocketverse had the Mind Stone and one had the Power Stone, those only affect heroes in their respective Pocketverse. But if any of the players find the Space Stone, then all of the benefits happen for all players. Now, I did put in red here, standard. In a standard campaign, controlling a particular Infinity Stone in a Pocketverse grants the following to those heroes. Now, I put standard there because this was a really easy way to implement an expert mode that isn't just adding more bad stuff to the campaign. In standard, you get these abilities, and I call those win more. It makes it easier for you to win. If you're playing expert, though, you don't get the win more effects. So that was my thinking behind that. Then, as I already showed, the next page is the Infinity Stones environment. I will say that this portion, the player-controlled Infinity Stones, went through a lot of revision. I had initially planned to have ways for Infinity Stones to get shuffled into player decks, and then I had a complicated way of paying for them. Well, not complicated, but a strange way. Like, their cost was the number of boost icons the card had, and then you had to change the text on them to be more player-facing instead of villain-facing. That was really, really complicated, and it was kind of a slog. It was just messy, so I ended up replacing that with the system you see here, the player-controlled Infinity Stones, just giving buffs for the heroes in that particular Pocketverse. So that's it. Shatterverse is now an expansion for Pocketverse, and I think it's a lot of fun. I'm going to play... I still have one game in my Pocketverse campaign, and that is Rocket and Aggression versus Hela. So what I'm going to do for that game, and it should come out tomorrow in YouTube time, even though these videos are not recorded anywhere close to each other, but I'm going to pretend like that Pocketverse was a Shatterverse campaign, deal out some of the Infinity Stones, and then go through the victory and defeat as if I had been doing that all along in that campaign. So that's Shatterverse. Let me know in the comments what you think. I've really been thinking about this for a long time. I got Thunderbolt Apache Leader like 3 years ago, and ever since I started playing that, I thought I was thinking about ways to incorporate some of that stuff into Marvel Champions, and this is kind of the culmination of that. Pocketverse was the easier of the two, but then now that I have Pocketverse, it's really easy to add a new layer to that as Shadowverse. So thanks for watching. I hope you have a marvelous day, and be on the lookout tomorrow for Game 3 of my Shatterverse campaign.